I was still on my knees when her mother-in-law stepped closer, her heels clicking like a countdown over the cold tile. The smell of bleach stung my nose. My palms burned inside the yellow gloves they'd tossed at me that morning. Behind me, the toilet bowl glimmered under fluorescent lights, the same lights that reflected Amy's face, my sister, standing in the doorway, pretending not to see me. And then, Evelyn Hart, queen of this marble palace, leaned in just enough so only I would hear it. "This," she whispered, "is all you're really good at." Laughter floated from the hallway. Someone muttered, "Isn't she Amy's sister? The failed one?" I felt the words land on me like spit. I didn't defend myself. I didn't even look at Amy, who shifted her weight and tucked her hair behind her ear like she wasn't the one who brought me here in the first place. I simply tightened my grip on the scrub brush until my knuckles cracked. I swallowed every shard of humiliation. Then, without a word, I stood up, walked past them, stepped outside into the sunlight, and made a phone call that would change every life in that building, including my sister's. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to know something. Where are you watching this from tonight? And what time is it where you are? I want to know how far this story about dignity and the price of forgetting it has traveled. The morning had started so differently. I woke up before my alarm made coffee in my tiny Raleigh apartment and stood by the window watching the streetlights fade. It was supposed to be a hopeful day. My first day working at Hartwell & Coben, the company owned by my sister's in-laws. Amy had insisted it was a great opportunity, a way for me to get back on my feet after years of living paycheck to paycheck. Just help in the office, she'd said. Mom-in-law believes in giving family a chance. I should have known better, but I wanted to believe her. Amy is 6 years younger than me, the one I raised after our mother died, the one I worked nights and weekends to send to college, the one I kept safe when we had no one else in the world. So I smoothed my thrift store blouse, tied my hair back, and told myself the day would be good. When I arrived at the Hartwell building, the glass tower sparkled against the morning sky, tall and sharp, like something built specifically to intimidate people like me. Inside, the marble floors reflected my face back at me. I felt small but determined. The receptionist, a young woman with hair pinned into a perfect twist, smiled politely when I said my name. Then the smile froze just a little. "Oh, Ms. Hale, welcome. You can wait right there." Her eyes flicked over me with something between pity and warning. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach, but before I could speak, the elevator dinged and out stepped Evelyn Hart herself. Evelyn was everything her reputation promised: crisp white suit diamonds that glittered under the lights, chin angled like she was forever smelling something unpleasant. Amy appeared behind her, smaller, quieter, clutching her purse strap with familiar, nervous fingers. She didn't meet my eyes. "Marianne Evelyn," said, stretching my name into something less than polite, "follow me. We believe in hands-on learning here." I walked behind them through polished corridors, expecting maybe a small office or a cubicle or even a desk with a cheap plastic chair. Instead, they led me through a side door down a hallway that smelled of chemicals and into a restroom where a bucket and gloves waited beside a toilet that didn't look like it needed cleaning at all. I looked at Amy, then really looked. Her cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth as if to object, then closed it quickly when Evelyn glanced back at her. "This is just temporary," she whispered. "Mom-in-law says everyone should start from the bottom, even me someday." But we both knew that wasn't true. Amy had never started from the bottom. I'd kept her from ever falling that far. I tried to steady my voice. "Amy, why didn't you tell me?" She gave a tiny shrug, eyes darting away. "Don't make this hard, please. Just do what she asks." And then she stood there and let Evelyn place the bucket in my hands. "Show us you can be useful," Evelyn said, like she was speaking to a mute dog. Bathroom floors say a lot about a person's work ethic. So I lowered myself onto the cold tile and began scrubbing, feeling every year of sacrifice rising in my throat. I thought of the nights I'd slept on a mattress no thicker than a quilt, so Amy could have the bed. I thought of the double shifts, the ramen dinners, the Christmases, where the only gift I could afford was a pair of warm socks. And I thought of how I'd protected her even when I had nothing left to give. Yet here she was watching me kneel, The tile blurred as tears threatened, but I ground them back. People passed the doorway, some staring, some whispering, none helping. One of them laughed. I guess her sister couldn't get her anything better. Amy flinched, but didn't defend me. That was the moment right there that something inside me cracked wide open. When Evelyn leaned in and hissed, "This is all you're good at." I felt the words cut into me with an accuracy she couldn't possibly understand. She thought she was humiliating a broke, desperate woman with no future. She had no idea I was someone who'd survived far worse than her smug cruelty. I placed the scrub brush in the bucket, stood peeled off the gloves slowly enough that she had to watch, and pushed past her without waiting for permission. Out in the hall, the air felt sharp electric. I walked straight through the lobby, ignoring the stairs, and stepped outside into the sunlight. My hands shook not from shame, but from something fiercer, something that felt like awakening. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't used in years. Ben Carter. A friend from a lifetime ago. Someone who knew the world of finance, the world Hartwell was so proud of. Someone who owed me a favor I'd never called in. He picked up on the second ring. "Marianne, wow. Hey, it's been forever. Are you okay?" I closed my eyes and exhaled. "Ben, I said I need your help." "What kind of help?" His voice sharpened. I looked back at the glass tower behind me, sunlight flashing off its perfect edges. "I need you to investigate a company for me. Hartwell & Co., I want everything. Financial statements, loans, vendor contracts, public filings, private whispers, whatever you can legally find." There was a pause. "Marianne." Why I didn't answer directly. Because I think something's very wrong there. And because they just made a mistake. "What mistake?" he asked. I stared at my reflection in the glass door, hair messy from scrubbing cheeks, flushed blouse wrinkled. I didn't look powerful, but I felt something close to it. "They underestimated me," I said softly. I went home to my small apartment and sat at the kitchen table that wobbled if you leaned too hard on one corner. The room felt too quiet. I replayed the bathroom scene again and again, not because of the humiliation I'd endured worse, but because of Amy's silence. That silence hurt in a way nothing Evelyn said could have touched. I made tea just to fill the silence, but it didn't help. Every beat of my heart echoed with the same question. How did we get here? When I was 18 and Amy was 12, our mother's kidneys were failing. I quit school, took whatever jobs I could find, and kept us afloat while our world collapsed around us. I was the one who sat beside Mom's hospital bed at night, the one who checked Amy's homework, the one who taught her how to braid her hair, the one who lied to her about how bad things were because she was just a child. After Mom died, I worked 3 jobs so Amy could go to college. I sent her care packages with granola bars and warm socks. I told her she deserved more than I ever had. She believed me, and I believed in her. But somewhere along the way, she'd learned to believe in other people's approval more than my sacrifice. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Ben. "I'll start tonight. But fair warning if Hartwell is hiding something. I'll find it." I stared at the message for a long time. A new thought formed slowly like a seed cracking open in the dark. If Hartwell was built on lies, maybe I could pull every one of them into the light. I stood and walked to the mirror above the sink. My reflection stared back, tired, smudged, but unbroken. "They think you belong on the floor," I whispered. "Fine. Let them think that." I straightened my shoulders. "So when you stand up, they won't see you coming." That night I barely slept. Not from shame, not from anger, but from the quiet certainty blooming in my chest. I didn't know where this path led. I didn't know what Hartwell had buried under its glossy surface. But I knew one thing. Tomorrow I would walk back into that building. Not as the woman they tried to humiliate, but as the woman who had begun to take notes, connect dots, and prepare for something none of them were ready for. The bottom, I realized, was a dangerous place to put someone like me, because once I was down there, the only direction left was up. I barely slept after that first day. The humiliation didn't keep me awake, it was the clarity. the kind that arrives only after something inside you breaks so loudly you can't ignore the echo. I lay in the dark of my small apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment I stood up from that bathroom floor. How the tile pressed into my knees. How Evelyn's voice slid like oil across my skin. How Amy looked down and pretended not to see me. A dozen memories rose and fell in my mind, like waves breaking on shore, all of them leading back to one truth. This wasn't the first time I'd swallowed my pride to protect someone I loved. The next morning I stood in my kitchen clutching a mug of coffee, the smell rising warm and familiar, grounding me. Outside, Raleigh buzzed with early traffic. Inside, every surface of my little apartment carried a memory of the years I'd spent surviving. I set the mug down and looked at my reflection in the toaster, hair pinned back, eyes tired but alert. There was no panic, no dread. Only a heavy awareness that something inside me had shifted. Driving to Hartwell felt different that morning. The glass tower loomed against the sunrise, sharp and hollow at the same time. I'd once imagined places like this held promise, structure, order, opportunity. Now, after only one day inside it, I sensed something rotten behind the polished floors and manicured smiles. Something trembling beneath the surface, masked by fake elegance. I didn't know what yet, but I intended to find out. When I stepped inside, the lobby hummed with fluorescent calm. The receptionist glanced up from her screen and stiffened. "Good morning, Ms. Hale," she said, tone softening with something almost like sympathy. For a split second I wondered who she felt sorry for me, or the people upstairs who believed humiliating me would be consequence-free. I nodded toward the elevators. "Morning." I pressed the button, hearing her whisper to someone beside her as the doors slid shut. "That's her. The sister they made clean the restrooms." The words should have hurt. Instead, they fueled me. On the third floor, I walked down the corridor to the maintenance closet, the one Evelyn had pointed at as if it were my rightful place in the hierarchy. The bucket and gloves were still there, waiting like obedient pets. I ignored them and started gathering the supplies needed for the day. It wasn't submission, it was strategy. You can learn a lot about a building by walking through its forgotten corners. I'd just finished checking my list when a voice behind me said, "You don't belong down here." I turned to see an older man pushing a cart stacked with tools and spare parts. His name patch read Thomas. His silver hair was cropped short, his eyes steady and kind. He didn't smile, but something in his gaze felt like a small rebellion. "I'm exactly where they want me," I said. He nodded slowly. "Not where you should be." There wasn't anything to say to that. He studied me for a moment, then lowered his voice. "You're not the first they've done this to." The words hung in the air between us. I swallowed. "Really?" He nodded once. "Powerful people get scared. That's when they get cruel." Then he picked up a wrench, as if the truth he'd just spoken was nothing more than another tool he carried in his pocket. He left me standing there wondering what kind of fear could turn a family like the Hartwells into tyrants. Later that morning, while I wiped fingerprints from a glass panel near the stairwell, I overheard two accountants in hushed conversation. They stood by the break room door, unaware that sound carries easily across polished floors. "We can't keep stalling vendors," one whispered. "They're threatening legal action." "The CFO said to hold off another week," the other replied. "But that's what he said last week." My hand froze mid-wipe. I kept my eyes on the glass, letting the words slip into me like puzzle pieces locking together. Something was wrong. Very wrong. At noon, I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, the spring sunlight warm on my face. I found a bench near the loading dock and sat scrolling through messages. One from Amy. Short, neutral. "Hope today is smoother. Mom-in-law says you're doing fine. Just keep your head down." My heart tightened. I wrote back, "We need to talk." Then I erased it. Instead, I opened an email from Ben. The attachment was a preliminary outline, but even the summary chilled me. Hartwell & Co. is showing signs of major financial distress. Income to debt ratio unstable, past due vendor payments, possible undisclosed loan, undisclosed. That word alone said everything. He'd added a final line. Something feels off. I'll dig deeper. I closed the email and stared across the parking lot, watching employees shuffle in and out of the building. Their shoulders were hunched, their eyes wary. They weren't treated as people, they were treated as moving parts in Evelyn's machine. I recognized the culture instantly. Fear disguised as discipline. Silence disguised as professionalism. When I returned inside, Amy was waiting in the hallway outside a small conference room. Her face lit with forced brightness when she saw me. "Hey," she said, stepping closer. "Can we talk for a second?" I followed her inside. She shut the door and wrung her hands. "Look, about yesterday. Mom-in-law can be intense. She believes in tough love." "What about you?" I asked softly. "Do you believe in it too?" The question stunned her. She blinked, her breath quickening. "I didn't know it would be like that," she whispered. "I thought you'd be in the office. I didn't think she would make you do that. But when she did, I said you didn't stop her." Her shoulders sagged. "I couldn't." "You don't understand how things work around here. Then explain it to me." She stepped back. "We need everything to look stable for the investors visiting next month. If I push back, it makes me look disloyal. Ryan says." She cut herself off, eyes darting toward the hallway. I heard enough. Investors, stability, image. Amy wasn't protecting me. She was protecting the illusion of her place in this family. I left her there in the quiet room, staring at the floor. By late afternoon, I'd walked past the executive elevator twice, carrying supplies that felt more like camouflage than tools. On my second trip, the elevator opened and a woman in a sharp gray suit stepped out, clutching a folder labeled "Vendor Contracts, Urgent." She rushed past me so quickly she didn't notice when a paper slipped from the folder and skated across the floor toward my feet. I picked it up. The page read "Outstanding balance 90 days overdue." 90 days. That was 3 months. The same amount of time the hallway accountant had mentioned. The same timeline that made the numbers in Ben's email start to make sense. I slid the paper beneath the stack in her folder, just as she turned back flustered. "Did you see Oh. Thanks," she said, grabbing it without noticing the panic she'd revealed. That night back home, I opened my laptop and spread my notes across the table. Conversations I'd overheard, glances exchanged, shredded documents, Amy's slip about investors, the receptionist's pity, Thomas's warning, Ben's email. The pieces formed a shape, a dangerous one. Hartwell & Co. wasn't just employing humiliation as a culture, it was using it as cover, a distraction, a mask for something much bigger, something trembling and failing beneath the marble floors. I remembered Evelyn in that restroom doorway, the smug tilt of her chin, the confidence of someone who believed no one could touch her. And suddenly, I understood the fear Thomas had spoken of. If a company is cracking from the inside, the people responsible become desperate to keep the cracks from being seen. I leaned back in my chair, rubbed my eyes, and finally allowed myself to whisper the truth out loud. "They think I'm powerless," I said. "Good. That's exactly what I need them to think." I gathered my notes, opened a new email draft to Ben, and typed, "Dig deeper. I want full access to debt structure, vendor contracts, and assets. No matter what you find, send it." My finger hovered over the send button. Then I clicked it. The apartment fell silent. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one. Inside, my resolve hardened into something sharp and steady. If Hartwell was built on intimidation and lies, then someone needed to uncover the truth. And it might as well be the woman they tried to break on a bathroom floor. Evelyn summoned me to her office at 8 sharp, her voice clipped and bright like she'd swallowed a teaspoon of polished silver. I'd barely stepped into the building when a junior assistant hurried over, breathless, and said, "Mrs. Hart wants you. Now." The way she said it, half warning, half apology, made something cold settle beneath my ribs. I followed the hallway past framed awards and glossy photographs of ribbon cuttings. Every smiling face in those photos seemed to mock me with the same message, "You don't belong here." When I entered Evelyn's office, the first thing I noticed wasn't her. It was the bucket, a fresh one. Yellow gloves draped neatly over the rim like she'd laid out formal attire for a ceremony. A typed list 3 pages long was clipped beside it. She gestured toward the bucket without meeting my eyes. "Marianne," she said, her tone warm enough to curdle, "your duties today require attention to detail and humility, 2 things that build character." I stared at the bucket, then at her. I thought I was assigned to office support. Her lips lifted into a precise, controlled smile. "I believe in starting from the foundation. If a person cannot master cleanliness, how can she possibly handle anything more complex?" She folded her hands. "We're giving you an opportunity." I'd heard that word all my life. Opportunity. It had been used to justify long hours, underpaid shifts, sacrifices swallowed without praise. Coming from Evelyn, it landed like a slap. She lifted a small rectangular item from her desk and held it out. A name badge. I reached for it, hopeful for one brief suspended second, only to see the words printed in black, "Maintenance Support." Her eyes glinted. "Wear it proudly." I took it because I had no intention of playing my hand yet. But the name badge felt like a brand, a label meant to declare my place beneath her heel. As I left her office, my cheeks burned, but I forced a steady breath. I wasn't here to win affection. I wasn't here to bow either. I pinned the badge to my shirt and headed toward the main corridor. The hallway was already filling with employees carrying coffees and laptops, their shoes clicking confidently across the polished floors. Evelyn's timing had been deliberate. She'd wanted them all to see me as her newest pawn. "Is that Amy's sister?" someone whispered behind me. I thought she'd be in accounting or admin, no-look maintenance support. Their voices pricked at me like needles, but I kept walking. By mid-morning, I was scrubbing the glass walls of the main corridor, a place designed to be a stage. People walked by, constantly chattering about client meetings and budgets. I could see my reflection warped across the glass hair tied back, 2 tightly yellow gloves up to my elbows, name badge gleaming like a warning. Amy appeared at the far end of the hallway wearing a navy dress and her wedding set that sparkled under the recessed lights. She walked beside a senior manager, laughing politely. When her eyes flicked toward me, her smile faltered. Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't stop. She didn't speak. She let the moment pass like I was invisible. Then Evelyn strode by, pausing just long enough to tilt her head and say, "Some people just belong at the bottom." A few employees tittered nervously, unsure whether to laugh or flee. My jaw clenched, but I kept my strokes slow and even across the glass. My silence wasn't weakness. It was fuel. A client entered the lobby, an older man in an expensive suit flanked by 2 associates. He glanced at me and said to Evelyn, "Short-staffed this morning." "Oh no," she replied brightly. "That's family. We believe in teaching humility." Laughter again. Inside my chest, something tightened until it felt like wire pulled too taut. I moved to the next pane of glass, breathing steadily. That's when Thomas appeared from around the corner, pushing a cart of tools. "Don't let her break you," he murmured quietly as he passed behind me. I didn't turn, didn't respond, but the words steadied my heartbeat. Later, Evelyn ordered me to re-clean the entire conference restroom because the mirror streaked under certain angles. She stood with arms crossed as I wiped the same spotless surface, tilting her head theatrically to inspect my work. Amy stood behind her, expression tense, toes pointed inward the way she used to stand when she was nervous as a child. "Show her how it's done," Evelyn said sweetly. Amy froze. "Mom-in-law, I don't think." "Go on." Evelyn didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Amy stepped forward, took the cloth from my hand, and wiped one corner that was already clean. Her movements were stiff, embarrassed, but she did it. And that somehow stung worse than anything Evelyn had said. When Evelyn left, satisfied, Amy remained behind. She handed the cloth back without meeting my eyes. "It's better if you just do what she wants," she whispered. "Please, don't make things harder." For who? I asked softly. You or her? She sucked in a breath, guilt flashing across her face, but then she left without answering. After lunch, Evelyn sent me upstairs with a stack of documents for the 6th floor boardroom. The elevator doors opened to a different world. Soft carpet, framed architectural blueprints, air so still it felt filtered. I could sense tension humming beneath the surface. Employees walked briskly, eyes fixed ahead, clutching folders like shields. The boardroom door was propped open. As I stepped inside, I saw a projector frozen on a slide titled Debt Restructuring and Emergency Funding Proposal. A man in a crisp shirt, the CFO, lunged forward and switched off the screen. This isn't for distribution, he snapped, one hand trembling slightly. I'm just delivering these, I said, setting them on the table. He didn't reply. His jaw was tight, sweat dotted his temple. Something in my gut twisted. On my way back down, my thoughts churned too loudly to ignore. 3 months of overdue balances, secret documents, Evelyn's desperation to control optics, Amy's panic about investors. Something was unraveling. At 3 o'clock, Evelyn found me again. She approached with deliberate calm, as though she'd rehearsed the moment. You've been wandering, she said, her voice like polished marble, smooth, cold, unforgiving. I was delivering documents. You were in areas you weren't assigned to. She stepped closer. Her perfume smelled like money and threat. I expect obedience, not curiosity. Curiosity. That was interesting. People only fear curiosity when they have something to hide. I gave her a polite nod. I follow instructions, Mrs. Hart. Her eyes narrowed, searching for a crack. She found none. She walked away unsatisfied. By late afternoon, the air in the building felt electric. Conversations cut off abruptly when executives walked by. Phones rang with urgency. A woman from legal hurried past me carrying a file stamped confidential. One employee muttered to another payroll might be delayed again. Fear was leaking through the seams of the building, no matter how hard Evelyn tried to patch it. Near closing time, I was wiping down a counter in the finance hallway when Melissa, the accountant from earlier, stepped out of an office looking pale. She glanced down the hall to make sure no one else was near, then whispered, "Be careful." I paused mid-wipe. About what? She swallowed hard. They're not telling employees everything. Numbers aren't adding up. And the CFO. She hesitated, then added, "Don't trust the spreadsheets Evelyn signs. Just don't." Before I could ask more, she pressed a folded envelope into my hand. "If anyone asks, you didn't get this from me." Then she disappeared down the hallway like a frightened bird. I held the envelope until I found a quiet, unused conference room. Inside were copies of invoices showing inconsistent amounts, handwritten notes that contradicted official reports, and an email chain where Evelyn pushed someone to adjust projections to maintain investor confidence. Hot anger surged through me. Not rage, but clarity. This wasn't simple mismanagement. This was deception. When I stepped back into the hallway, Thomas was waiting near the elevator. "You're planning something," he said softly. I didn't answer. He nodded like he'd already known. "Ryan's father once tried to expose her," he murmured. "He didn't last long. She made sure of it." I felt my jaw tighten. "Why tell me? Because you're not like them," he said. "And she knows it. That makes you dangerous. Dangerous." The word didn't frighten me. It steadied me. When my shift ended, I walked out of the building feeling the same heavy certainty I'd felt the day before, but sharper now, more focused. The Hartwell Tower glowed white against the dusk sky, beautiful on the outside but rotting from within. In the parking lot, I pulled out my phone. A message from Ben appeared on the screen. Meeting confirmed. Thursday morning at Grand Oak Hotel. Be ready, be ready. I slipped my keys into the ignition, the engine humming to life beneath my hands. They built an empire on humiliation and lies, I whispered. Then I looked up at the gleaming tower one last time. It's time someone tells the truth. I sat at my kitchen table long after sunset, the glow of my laptop throwing pale light across the small room. My hands hovered over the trackpad as I opened the PDF Ben had sent. The heading at the top, Hartwell & Co. Financial Overview. Confidential felt almost surreal, like I'd somehow been handed a doorway into the world Evelyn guarded with iron claws. But as the pages loaded, the illusion of strength evaporated. The numbers were a disaster. Negative cash flow bleeding month after month. Vendor payments over 90 days overdue. 2 major construction projects, labeled active on Hartwell's website, were according to actual invoices frozen. Looming loan deadlines circled in red, and near the bottom of the summary, highlighted in a tone of red that felt like accusation, was a single line that made my stomach drop: unauthorized discretionary spending, signed by E.H. Evelyn Hart. I leaned back in my chair, breath catching. It wasn't just mismanagement, it wasn't just arrogance, it was negligence wrapped in a designer suit and hidden behind the humiliation of others. My phone rang. Ben's name flashed on the screen. I answered, unable to pull my eyes from the document. "Marianne," he said. "I was hoping you'd call first. Tell me this isn't what it looks like." He sighed. "It's worse. I only had time for a preliminary scan, but the company's drowning. If someone doesn't inject capital soon, they'll be forced into liquidation. Think 6 to 8 weeks, maybe less." I pressed my palm to my forehead. How is Evelyn still holding everything together? She's not. She's propping it up with illusions and delayed payments. A pause. And someone signed a secondary loan authorization. Someone who didn't want Ryan to know. My pulse kicked. You think it was Evelyn? I think she's the only one with enough control and enough ego to risk it. I closed the laptop, my mind spinning. Can you get deeper, more records? Anything that shows where the money went. If you can get me internal documents, anything, this blows wide open, he said. But Marianne, be careful. These people don't play nice. I know, I whispered. Trust me, I know. The next morning I arrived at Hartwell before sunrise. The building felt eerie when empty, cold, hollow, too quiet. I slipped inside using my temporary badge, grateful no one stopped me. Cleaning staff weren't expected to ask questions. That made them invisible. Invisibility, I was learning, was a useful asset. The executive floor was empty, lights still off. I walked down the corridor to the copy center and found a printer, still warm, a draft left in the tray from yesterday. Curiosity tugged at me. I lifted the top sheet. Emergency Investor Outreach List. My chest rose sharply. Names of venture groups, private equity firms, angel investors, all marked with notes. Declined. Not suitable at this time. High risk. Whoever compiled the list had scribbled a frustrated note in the margin, running out of options. I slid the page beneath my shirt as footsteps echoed down the hall. I pivoted, grabbed a stack of envelopes from the counter, and pretended to be organizing them. A project manager strode past, nodding politely without much interest. As soon as he disappeared around the corner, I exhaled, my pulse slowing. Later that day, I ducked into a supply room and sent the scanned document to Ben, marking it urgent. His reply came barely 5 minutes later. This confirms it. They're courting outside money, desperate. If they can't secure a bailout, they're done. I typed back quickly. Keep digging. I think we're missing something big. He responded. I'll call you tonight. And, Marianne, you're in deep now. I knew. But the feeling wasn't fear. It was momentum. That afternoon during my break, I stepped outside and called Lucas. We hadn't spoken in months, not since I'd run into him at a hardware store and awkwardly caught up about life. But if anyone understood construction projects, the real kind, not the fantasy ones Hartwell pretended to run, it was him. He picked up on the second ring. Well, if it isn't Marianne Hale. I could hear the smile in his voice. For the first time in 24 hours, tension eased from my shoulders. Lucas, do you have a minute for you? Sure. What's wrong? I need eyes on a couple real estate portfolios. Quietly. He went silent for a moment. Whose portfolios? Hartwell and Coden. A low whistle. Dangerous territory? I know. He exhaled. Send them over. I'll take a look. I emailed him a set of files Melissa had passed along, old project budgets, photographs of abandoned sites, contractor statements. Only an hour later he wrote back. These numbers don't make sense. There's money allocated for tasks that never happened, equipment that was never delivered, labor hours that no one can confirm, someone's burying expenses. My stomach tightened. Could it be incompetence? No. This is deliberate. Someone's planning for collapse or siphoning off funds or both. I closed my eyes. The truth was forming in a shape too ugly to ignore. Thank you, Lucas. Marianne. Be careful, he said softly. People who hide money like this usually have other things to hide. The warning struck deeper than he knew. An hour later, as I carried cleaning supplies down the hall, I heard raised voices behind the boardroom door. I slowed, listening through the narrow crack. We cannot keep lying to the bank, the CFO snapped. Watch your tone, Evelyn hissed. Ryan's voice broke in frantic. Mom, we can't keep pretending everything's fine. The investors will see through it. Evelyn slammed something paper or a hand against the table. They will see what I tell them to see. The CFO forced out a shaky breath. They're not fools, and if they see the real books, they'll either walk or they'll buy us out. My heart hammered. I stepped back quickly and kept walking. They couldn't know I heard. Not yet. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows as I moved through the building, Evelyn's eyes following me more sharply than usual. Her gaze lingered too long. She'd begun to sense something she couldn't name. During one hallway encounter, she stepped directly into my path. You weren't assigned to be on this floor, she said, her smile too perfectly shaped. I was asked to deliver documents, I replied calmly. She circled me like a lioness scenting threat. I expect obedience, not wandering. I met her eyes. I follow instructions, Mrs. Hart. Something in my tone unsettled her. She blinked, stepping back. But suspicion clouded her face as she disappeared into an office. Before leaving that evening, I cleaned the finance hallway again. Melissa emerged, glancing around. I shouldn't say this, she whispered, but be careful. If Evelyn even suspects you've seen something. She didn't finish. Instead, she pressed another sheet of paper into my hand before scurrying away. I unfolded it in the elevator. Vendor contracts. At risk of termination. Someone had highlighted the line, insufficient funds. The pieces were falling into place, all of them pointing to one woman. When the elevator doors opened, Thomas stood waiting, leaning on his cart. You see more than the rest of them, he said quietly. I didn't deny it. He studied my face, then asked, What are you going to do with what you know? I stayed silent. He nodded. Ryan's father tried to fight Evelyn once. She pushed him out of the company, nearly out of the family. Whatever she's hiding, she'll burn the place down before she lets people see it. Maybe that was supposed to scare me. Instead, it clarified my resolve. When I finally got home, I sat at my kitchen table again, spreading all the documents across its worn surface. Melissa's papers, Lucas's analysis, Ben's report, my own observations. Every piece fit into the same mosaic Hartwell and Comer was collapsing from the inside, and Evelyn had orchestrated the fall while pretending to stand above it. My phone buzzed. Ben ready for next step. I stared at the message. Then I typed, Yes, move forward. He replied within seconds. I'll prepare the offer. I exhaled, the weight in my chest shifting into something steadier, more controlled. I looked at the stack of evidence at the glowing city lights outside my window and whispered the truth aloud. They thought humiliation would break me, I said. But all it did was teach me exactly where to strike. And now for the first time I knew I wasn't simply reacting, I was preparing. By the 20th morning of working at Hartwell, my body moved on autopilot, but my mind was razor sharp. The building's routines no longer intimidated me. I'd learned the rhythms of this place, who arrived early, who avoided eye contact, which hallways carried rumors more quickly than sound. The mask of order Evelyn tried to maintain had begun to crack. People whispered now. They hurried more. They looked over their shoulders. A storm was coming, and they felt it long before they understood why. As I stepped into the lobby, the receptionist leaned closer to a coworker and murmured, "Payroll's late again." Their eyes flicked toward me as I passed, but instead of pity, I caught a flicker of something else, fear. Hartwell's collapse was no longer a secret. Upstairs, Evelyn waited with her morning commands, her expression tight, her poise brittle. "Marianne," she said, voice too bright, "bring this tray to the 6th floor boardroom. We have guests from Atlanta today." She held out a silver tray with tea coffee and small linen napkins folded into crisp triangles. "Try not to spill anything," she added sweetly. I didn't answer. I simply took the tray and walked toward the executive elevator. My badge didn't grant access up here, but today someone had forgotten to change the settings. The elevator chimed open, welcoming me into a world that had always been declared off-limits. The 6th floor looked like a hotel lobby, quiet, expensive, and self-satisfied. Thick carpet muffled my footsteps. Frosted glass walls glowed with morning light. The boardroom door was open, and inside sat 3 investors from Atlanta, leaning back in their chairs with the easy arrogance of men who had opinions about everything and expertise in almost nothing. Ryan stood near the head of the table tie, slightly askew, fingers fidgeting. His nerves radiated across the room. Amy sat beside him, perfect hair, perfect lipstick, but her hands twisted nervously in her lap. Evelyn hovered near the windows, posture, stiff eyes, sharp. One of the investors nodded toward me. "Who's this?" Before anyone else could speak, Evelyn said, "My daughter-in-law's sister. She's learning the value of humble work." A polite smattering of laughter. It took every ounce of discipline not to show what boiled inside me. I moved around the table with the tray, setting cups in front of each man. My hands were steady, but there was tension coiled in the center of me like a held breath. I reached the 3rd chair when Amy suddenly stepped close behind me, too close. I didn't see her hand, but I felt the brush of fabric against my back. The tray tilted. Coffee spilled across the polished table, splashing across a neatly prepared packet of documents. One investor jumped back, cursing under his breath. The room froze. Ryan's face turned red. Evelyn's eyes flashed triumph. And then Evelyn's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Clean it up," she snapped. "Now." I knelt. The carpet pressed into my knees. The towel scratched against the table as I wiped up the mess. My cheeks burned, but not from shame. From the clarity of the moment. The knowledge that this was exactly what Evelyn wanted, to put me on the floor again in front of witnesses. In front of Amy. In front of men she wanted to impress. As I worked, I saw Amy standing above me, hands trembling slightly. Her expression wasn't smug. It was confused, almost pained. But she didn't speak. She didn't kneel. She didn't stop anything. One investor muttered, "Unprofessional." Evelyn said, "You see what I have to deal with? Some people can't rise above their background." That was the breaking point. My breath steadied. My spine straightened. I placed the towel neatly on the tray, stood up slowly, and looked Evelyn in the eye. "I'm done," I said. Silence snapped across the room like a pulled cord. Evelyn blinked. "Excuse me, I quit." My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was steady enough to shake the floor. I untied the cleaning apron and laid it across the chair. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from release, from the power of the words forming in my mouth for the first time in years. Amy stepped forward, eyes wide. "Marianne, don't say something," I said to her, my voice unexpectedly soft. "Just once. Say something." She swallowed hard. "Not here, of course not," I murmured. I walked out, past the boardroom, past the reception desk on the 6th floor, past the perfectly arranged vases and artwork Evelyn had chosen to impress people. My heart beat hard against my ribs, but each step grew lighter. By the time I reached the parking lot, the air felt clean again. Warm. Real. Behind me, the building towered like a glass monument to arrogance. My phone buzzed. "Amy." I ignored it. Instead, I sat in my car, inhaled deeply, and called the only person who could help me turn this humiliation into leverage. Ben answered on the first ring. "I was about to call you." "Send the offer," I said. He went silent. "Already? Are you sure I'm done waiting?" You realize, he said slowly, that once this starts, there's no undoing it. Hartwell won't know what hit them. Good, I whispered. They shouldn't. I hung up when I saw Amy running toward my car, panic etched on her face. She slammed her hand lightly on the window. I rolled it down halfway. "Marianne," she gasped. "You embarrassed me." I stared at her. "I embarrassed you." My voice was tired. Not angry anymore, just tired. "Amy," I was on my knees in front of investors. "They're important," she snapped back. "Ryan said we need them." "Mom-in-law. Stop calling her mom-in-law like she's your second mother. She doesn't treat you like a daughter." Amy winced. "You don't understand what's at stake. What's at stake, I said, is who you become when you let someone else decide your worth." She looked stunned, like I had slapped her with the truth she'd been avoiding. "I have to go," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "You do." I rolled up the window and drove away before she could say more. 10 minutes later, I sat in a grocery store parking lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The tremble running through me was not weakness. It was release. 20 years of swallowing my voice finally rising. My phone buzzed again. A message from Ben. Offer drafted. Sending to Hartwell's board by tonight. Meeting proposed for Thursday. I rested my head against the seat. Thursday, 2 days to change everything. That evening my apartment felt smaller than usual, but the air crackled with purpose. I opened my laptop and read through the draft Ben had prepared. Blue Harbor Investment Group was offering 60% ownership of Hartwell & Coman for $8.2 million. It was a rescue package disguised as a takeover. It was everything Hartwell needed and everything Evelyn feared. I closed the document and walked to the bathroom mirror. The same mirror where I had once cried silently before work now held a different woman. Someone with a new shape in her spine. Someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to reclaim. "They wanted me at the bottom," I whispered. "They shouldn't have taught me how to climb." I returned to the kitchen table, turned off every light except the one above me, and sat with the quiet. It wasn't peace, exactly. It was anticipation. It was the moment right before a storm hits and takes the roof off a house built on lies. When dawn arrived the next morning, the message had already been delivered to Hartwell's board with a stamped deadline. And somewhere in the tower across town, Evelyn Hart was reading an offer she never expected from the woman she thought she crushed under a bathroom sink. The morning the offer hit Hartwell's boardroom, the entire building vibrated with an energy I could feel even from miles away. I wasn't there to witness the first shockwaves, but they traveled fast. By 8:15, my phone buzzed with a message from Melissa. "What did you do? People are panicking." I sat in my car outside Blue Harbor's temporary office, watching sunlight climb over the skyline. I didn't reply. Instead, I closed my eyes and breathed in the calm before the chaos. Today, I wasn't Marianne the janitorial shadow. I wasn't the sister they whispered about. I wasn't the woman Evelyn tried to grind into the floor. Today, I was the anonymous investor who had just offered to buy 60% of their collapsing empire. By 9, my phone rang. "Ben." "It's happening," he said without greeting. "War has officially begun." "What's the reaction?" "You want the truth?" "Shock, confusion, a little fear. And Evelyn." He chuckled. "She's furious. You could power downtown with the voltage coming off her right now." I opened my eyes. "Good." He cleared his throat, turning serious. "They've requested an in-person meeting. Thursday, 10 a.m., downtown at the Grand Oak." He paused. "They think they're negotiating with 3 faceless investors. They have no idea you'll be in the next room." My pulse quickened. "And they still believe the company's value is intact for now," he said. "Fear blinds people. Pride finishes the job." I thanked him and hung up. The city hummed around me. Cars moved. Birds crossed the sky. Joggers hurried by with earbuds in. None of them knew that inside a tower of steel and glass, an old dynasty was cracking. I walked into Blue Harbor's office, really a single rented suite inside a co-working building. It smelled faintly of coffee, old carpet, and ambition. Ben sat in a corner surrounded by printouts, diagrams, and spreadsheets. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up. "You ready?" he asked. "Tell me everything." He pointed to a chart on the wall. "Hartwell's debt has been compounding for years. But something new happened 3 months ago." He tapped a red circle. "A loan request, signed not by Ryan, but by Evelyn." My stomach tightened. What kind of loan? A bridge loan, dangerous, desperate. And when the bank declined, she started shuffling numbers, delaying vendor payments, falsifying projections. I stared at the document. So she knew everything was collapsing. She knew, Ben said quietly. And she hid it. A heaviness settled in my chest, not anger, but clarity. Humiliation wasn't the reason she'd put me on my knees. Power was. And she needed power more desperately than she needed air. Ben continued. "Our offer forces her hand. If she accepts, she gives up the company. If she refuses, the bank forecloses within 60 days. He leaned back. "She's trapped Marianne. Completely." I crossed my arms. And Ryan Ben hesitated. He's scared. He's loyal to his mother, but he isn't blind. He knows something's wrong. "And Amy." His voice softened. "Your sister is caught in the middle." I closed my eyes. The ache inside me pulsed like an old wound. I didn't want to destroy her world. "You're not," he said. "It was already collapsing. You're just the one walking into the ruins with a blueprint." The rest of the day blurred into strategy meetings. Plans, backup plans, contingencies. By late afternoon, my head throbbed, but my resolve only grew stronger. That evening, I drove past Hartwell & Co., not to enter, but to observe. Through the lobby windows, I saw employees moving in frantic currents, managers huddled in corners. Evelyn strode across the lobby with the fury of a queen, learning her throne was on fire. I parked and watched quietly. She stood at the reception desk, talking fast, her hands slicing through the air. A moment later, Amy hurried after, her face pale. She caught Evelyn's arm. Evelyn jerked it away. Something twisted inside me watching it. No matter what Amy had done and not done, she was still my sister, and she was drowning in a world she'd never been prepared to survive. That night, after I returned home, a knock sounded at my door. I opened it to find Lucas, his windbreaker zipped halfway up, his hair tousled from the breeze. "Busy?" he asked. "No more than usual." He stepped inside, closing the door gently behind him. "I have the analysis you asked for." He laid a folder on my kitchen table. "It's worse than we thought. Some of the construction funds didn't just disappear. They were rerouted. Rerouted where his eyes held mine. Personal accounts." My breath caught. Evelyn, or someone working with her. He hesitated. "Marianne. This is criminal territory." I sank into a chair. "They're willing to burn everything down to stay in power." "Yes," he said softly, "but that also means they're predictable. Cornered animals always are." We talked for another hour, quietly, intensely. When he finally rose to leave, he paused at the door. "You're doing the right thing," he said. I wasn't sure if he meant ethically or strategically, but his words steadied me anyway. After he left, I sat alone with the file, the city lights reflecting faintly across my floor. I spread every document, every note, every clue across the table. The truth formed a mosaic. Hartwell wasn't simply mismanaged, it was corrupted, and corruption always demanded light. By midnight, I had reconstructed the timeline: Evelyn's spending, failed projects, rejected loans, fabricated projections, investor panic, my offer landing at the perfect moment. Everything aligned. And yet, closing my laptop, I felt something more complex than triumph. I felt weight. I felt responsibility. I felt the echo of every time I'd protected Amy as a child, every time I'd worked an extra shift so she wouldn't feel poor. And yet she'd stood by silently as they made me kneel. A part of me wondered if she regretted it. At 1 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Amy, sister, things are bad. I don't know what's happening. Can we talk?" My fingers hovered over the keys. I typed erased, typed again. Finally, I replied Thursday, after the meeting. When dawn approached, sleep still far from me, I stepped onto my balcony. The air smelled like rain. Below, Raleigh stretched out in dim patches of street lamps and dark windows. For years I'd carried the weight of survival on my shoulders. Now for the first time I carried something else, possibility. Karma wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was as quiet as a signature at the bottom of a contract. Sometimes it was a meeting scheduled at 10 a.m. on a Thursday that would decide the future of an entire dynasty. Sometimes it was a janitor turning into a mirror those who never expected to see their own cracks. I looked toward the direction of the Hartwell Tower and whispered, "You should never have put me on that floor." Because once I knelt, I finally understood how much strength it takes to stand. And now, nothing, absolutely nothing, would keep me from walking into that meeting on Thursday, prepared to take everything they had tried to deny me. Not vengeance, not cruelty, just truth, and the dignity they thought I didn't deserve. I closed my eyes against the wind. The storm was almost here. The day of the meeting arrived wrapped in a tension so sharp it felt like the air itself had edges. I woke before sunrise, brewed coffee I barely tasted, and sat in silence at my tiny kitchen table while the city stirred awake outside my window. Today wasn't the battle. Today was the precursor, the gathering of the final pieces. The war would be Thursday. But what I learned today, what I faced today, would determine how I stepped into that room. When I arrived at Blue Harbor's office, Ben was already pacing with a stack of documents in his hand. "Morning," he said, though he looked like he hadn't slept. "We need to go over our projections again. If Hartwell counters, we need airtight reasoning." I dropped my bag on the table. "I'm ready." But as he pulled up the files, I wasn't looking at the numbers. I was looking at the photograph taped above his desk. Our outline of Hartwell's corporate structure. A spider web. Names interconnected by thick black lines. Departments threaded together by wires of power, money, and lies. And right in the center, the node circled in red ink, E.H. Evelyn Hart. Ben followed my gaze. "She's not stupid. She's ruthless, but not stupid. She's going to fight the offer until the last possible moment. She'll try to stall, she'll threaten, she'll bluff. She won't expect the truth," I said quietly. "No," he agreed. "She expects compliance. From everyone." He paused, studying me. "You okay?" I wasn't sure how to answer. My voice felt smaller than usual when I said I didn't expect to feel this much. About all of it. About the company. About my sister. "Marianne," he said gently, "to pull off something like this, you need clarity. But you're also allowed to be human. Human." That word felt strange in this context. Like softness had a place in a world built on sharp corners. We spent the next 3 hours fine-tuning the documents outlining ownership structures, calculating risk projections, structuring the takeover in a way that would survive legal scrutiny. The offer wasn't simply financial, it was strategic. If Hartwell collapsed, dozens of people would lose their jobs, maybe hundreds. My victory couldn't be an execution, it had to be a rebuild. Just before noon, we took a break. I stepped outside into the chill. The sky was gray, the clouds layered thick like a wall trying to hold back a storm. I stood still, hands deep in my coat pockets, listening to the distant hum of the highway. My phone buzzed. "Amy. Please meet me today. I need to talk to you. It's important." I stared at the words for a long moment before typing, "Location." "Right away," she replied. "The park by your apartment." 1 hour, I hesitated. Then 1 hour, I walked back inside. "I have to go out," I told Ben. "Something wrong?" "No," I said. "Just something I should have done a long time ago." He gave a slow nod. "Take the time you need. Tomorrow we go to war." When I reached the park, the sky was still heavy, the air still thick. Children's laughter in the distance clashed strangely with the tightness coiling inside me. I spotted Amy sitting on a bench beneath a bare tree, her hands clasped, her hair pulled back too neatly as if she had tried to make herself look composed, grown up, unshakable. But when she lifted her face to me, her eyes told a different story. She looked scared. "Hey," she said softly, voice wavering. "Thank you for coming." I sat beside her, leaving a few inches between us. The silence stretched until she whispered, "I don't even know where to start." "Start anywhere," I said. She looked down at her hands. "Mom-in-law is furious. She said someone out there is trying to destroy the family. She's convinced it's sabotage from a competitor. Ryan thinks it's some investor with a grudge." She swallowed. "They're both terrified. They're terrified of losing control," I corrected gently. She flinched, and I realized she'd heard those words before, maybe in her own mind. Her voice broke. "Why didn't you tell me things were this bad? Why didn't you say anything, Amy?" I said I tried. More than once. She shook her head. "I know. And I didn't listen." Tears welled in her eyes. I was so focused on fitting in with them. Being the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law. I didn't see what they were doing to you to me. A memory flashed, her standing frozen in the hallway as I knelt on the bathroom floor. "It's not too late," I said softly. She pressed a hand to her chest. "You're angry with me." "I'm hurt," I admitted. "But not angry." Her breath hitched. "I'm sorry. God, Marianne, I am so sorry." I looked away toward the playground where a little girl was climbing a ladder, her mother spotting her from below. Amy and I had once been just like that, me lifting her, me catching her when she wobbled, me believing she would one day become everything she deserved to be. "I lost myself," Amy whispered. "I let them shape me. And I let them hurt you." Her honesty unraveled something tight inside me. I blinked, the edges of my vision blurring. "What do you want now?" I asked quietly. She inhaled shakily. "I want out of the house, out of the company, out of whatever this life is with them." She wiped her cheeks. "But I don't know how. Ryan won't even look at me unless his mother approves of what I say. And what do you say?" I asked. She looked at me then, fully clearly. "I say I want my sister back." My chest tightened. My throat closed. For a moment I wasn't 35. I was 12 again, holding the hand of a scared little girl who needed me. I reached over and took her hand. "We'll figure it out," I said. She let out a sob of relief and leaned into me, our foreheads touching. The wind blew a strand of her hair across my cheek. I closed my eyes. The ache inside me settled, not gone, but easing. After a long silence, she pulled back. "What's going to happen tomorrow?" I studied her face. She wasn't ready for the truth, but she deserved it. "Tomorrow is the beginning of something new," I said. "For all of us." She nodded, though she didn't understand. And that was okay. When we parted, I walked home with a steadier step, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, resolution layered with compassion. This wasn't only about reclaiming my dignity, it was about deciding who I would be while doing it. That evening, Lucas stopped by again, carrying a folder under his arm. "New updates," he said. "And I wanted to check on you." He followed me inside and placed the folder on the table. "The accounts we talked about. Some of them were closed abruptly last month, money transferred. But no documentation of where. Hidden," I murmured. "Buried," he corrected. "And not by accident." I leaned against the counter, feeling the weight of every secret Hartwell tried to bury. Lucas stepped closer. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said softly. His voice caught me off guard, warm, steady, real. For a moment I let myself look at him, not the numbers, not the papers, not the puzzle pieces. Him. His eyes held concern without pity, respect without expectation. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. We reviewed documents for another hour. When he finally left, I stood at my door watching him walk away through the dim hallway, each step echoing faintly. Something warm lingered between us, a possibility forming in the quiet. But tomorrow the world would shift, and feelings were a luxury for a day beyond war. That night I spread every file, every note, every fragment of truth across my kitchen table. My apartment looked like a command center, A single lamp lit the documents, turning shadows into sharp angles. I sat breathing slowly, allowing the gravity of what tomorrow meant to settle into my bones. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't uncertain. I wasn't the woman on the floor anymore. I spoke aloud into the stillness, letting the words anchor me. Dignity has a cost. And I'm done letting others decide the price. The storm outside finally broke, rain tapping softly against my window. Tomorrow I would walk into the Grand Oak. Tomorrow, everything would begin. The rain had stopped just before dawn, leaving the world washed clean and glistening under the early light. I drove to the Grand Oak Hotel with the steady calm of someone carrying both truth and purpose. My windshield wipers clicked one last time as I pulled into the parking garage, and for a moment I sat there with my hands still on the wheel, listening to the quiet hum of the engine. Today wasn't the confrontation itself. Today was the gathering storm. But I would be close enough to feel the tremors of their panic, close enough to hear how they spoke when they believed the world still belonged to them. Ben met me in the lobby holding 2 folders and a coffee he pressed into my hand. "You doing okay?" he asked, searching my expression. "I'm ready," he nodded. "Good. They're already inside meeting with our front-facing partners. They think we're just another investment group from out of state. They have no idea you're here." We walked down a hallway lined with framed black and white photographs of the hotel's history celebrations, corporate gatherings, dignitaries shaking hands. All symbols of power, though none as honest or fragile as the real thing. We reached a door labeled Private Suite. Ben swiped a card and we stepped into the adjoining room that shared a wall with the conference room where the negotiation would happen. Inside was a long table, a coffee station, and a small marbled bathroom. Nothing fancy, but what mattered wasn't the decor, it was the device on the table. A speaker, small, black, unassuming. Ben gestured to it. "You'll be able to hear everything through the audio feed. A one-way connection. They won't know you're listening." I sat, my hands wrapped around the coffee cup, warming my fingers. What time, I asked. 10 minutes. My pulse quickened, not out of fear but anticipation. 10 minutes until I heard Evelyn Ryan, their legal team, all scrambling. 10 minutes until the empire that had once pushed my face toward the floor revealed its cracks. Ben placed a folder in front of me. "Just listen today. Tomorrow you step into the light." I nodded, staring at the cover sheet, Blue Harbor Capital Acquisition Negotiation. The door to the adjoining room opened, and faint voices filtered in, muffled, indistinct but growing clearer as chairs scraped and people settled. Ben pressed a button on the speaker, and suddenly it felt as though I was in the room with them. A man from our investment team spoke first. Calm, professional. "Thank you all for coming. We're ready to begin whenever you are." Then came her voice, sharp, composed, dripping with indignation. "Before we begin, Evelyn said, I want to understand exactly who we're dealing with." Your offer was abrupt, suspiciously so. "We want names." One of our representatives answered evenly. "Our group deals through holding companies for privacy reasons. That's standard in our industry." "No," Evelyn snapped. "Not when you attempt to seize majority control of a 40-year-old family corporation." I smiled. Even through a wall I could hear the strain under her words, the tremor of someone losing grip on a rope she'd assumed she'd never have to let go of. Another of our representatives, James, spoke. "We're not seizing anything. We're offering a lifeline. Hartwell & Co. is in crisis. We're here to solve it." A chair creaked. Papers rustled. Then Ryan's voice, tight, uncertain. We just need to understand the terms better." Our team flipped through documents. "You need $8.2 million in immediate capital. Our offer meets that need and preserves the company. If you decline, your creditors will force liquidation." Evelyn huffed. "We are not insolvent," I whispered to myself. "You are." But what happened next surprised even me. Ryan spoke again, but this time softer. "Mom, the numbers don't lie." Silence. A long, cold silence that could cut through steel. Then Evelyn hissed, We will discuss this later. James continued. We want to rescue a viable business. But our offer is time-sensitive. We have other opportunities. My heart beat faster. They were circling her slow enough to be polite, firm enough to corner. The sound was intoxicating. Then, a voice I didn't expect. Is there room to negotiate, Amy? Her voice trembled slightly, but she spoke with more strength than I'd heard from her in weeks. Surely we can adjust the percentage of ownership. 60% feels extreme. God, even now she was trying to clean up the mess, trying to smooth the edges of a crisis she didn't create. One of our partners responded tone gentle but immovable. 60% reflects the risk we're assuming. Hartwell's structure is unstable. A minority position won't allow us to stabilize operations. Evelyn scoffed. We don't need your charity. It's not charity, James said. It's survival. The room fell quiet again. The sound of someone shifting, someone breathing hard. Then Evelyn's voice returned, lower now, vibrating with controlled rage. What do you get out of this? What do your mysterious investors want? And our team delivered the line we'd rehearsed. A chance to rebuild something solid, transparent, sustainable. I almost laughed. The poetry of it. Another voice cut through, Douglas the Hartwell attorney. And if we refuse, the answer came smoothly. Then in 30 to 60 days the bank will seize your assets, and the company your father built. He paused. Then just long enough to land the blow will no longer exist. A chair scraped as someone stood. You insolent, that had to be Evelyn. But the attorney intervened. Mrs. Hart, please. Their desperation filled the room like smoke. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, heart pounding. Then something unexpected happened. Amy spoke again. Mom, maybe this is an opportunity. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Evelyn's voice shook with cold fury. Sit down! Amy didn't sit. We can't keep lying. We can't keep pretending everything is okay. This might be how we save jobs, save the company, save us. My throat tightened. My chest ached. Even through a wall I could feel her trembling. She was trying, fighting, becoming. And then came the sound of Evelyn slamming her hand on the table. Enough. Her voice turned sharp as glass. We are not surrendering our legacy to strangers. She didn't say the other words, the ones trapped in her throat. We are not surrendering to anyone we cannot control. Our representative remained calm. We need a decision by Thursday. Evelyn spat back. We will not be bullied. But the fear in her voice was unmistakable. Ryan whispered something. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like defeat. Paper rustled. Chairs shifted. Someone stood. Someone sat. Someone sighed heavily. Finally, Ben clicked off the speaker. What do you think he asked? I stared at the wall that separated me from them, from the people who once thought I was beneath them, from the voices that said I belonged on my knees. I think I said slowly, they are already breaking. And you, I exhaled. I'm ready. But inside a storm churned, not of revenge, not anymore, but of something deeper, more painful. Hearing Amy struggle to speak truth, hearing her try to push back, hearing her get crushed under Evelyn's fury, it stirred things I thought I'd buried. She wasn't the architect of my humiliation. She was another victim of it. That night I returned home exhausted but electric. Rain began again, tapping at the windows like impatient fingertips. I sat on my couch listening to the steady rhythm, letting the emotions of the day settle. Hurt, vindication, sadness, resolve. Then my phone buzzed. Amy again. Please, I need you. I didn't answer, not tonight. Tomorrow would change everything. And I needed every piece of strength I had left to walk into what waited at 10 a.m. A truth so powerful it would shatter the world the Hartwells built on pride, intimidation, and lies. For the first time in years, I felt my spine straighten. Tomorrow I would step into the room. Tomorrow I would no longer be the woman they tried to break. Tomorrow I would be the one holding the pen that decided the fate of an empire. And this time I would choose the terms. The morning of the signing felt like the air had learned how to vibrate. That same nervous hum that fills a courtroom before a verdict or a church before a confession. Thick, electric, expectant. I arrived at the Grand Oak earlier than anyone else, walking the halls with quiet footsteps while the sky outside shifted from violet to gray. Today wouldn't just decide the future of Hartwell & Co., it would decide the future of every life tethered to it, including mine. Ben was already there, seated at a long mahogany table in the adjoining suite, papers spread neatly before him. "They'll be here in 30 minutes, he said, sliding a cup of coffee toward me. I took it, though my hands were steady without caffeine. "How's the setup?" He gestured to the small conference mic fixed to the wall. "Audio's clean. Once they're all here, we'll bring you in at the exact moment." "And the contract bulletproof," he replied. "Once they sign, you legally own the majority stake. Evelyn can fume, threaten, cry, or claw, nothing changes it." I took a slow breath, then nodded. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. Not of her voice, not of her wealth, not of the power she wielded like a weapon. Truth is stronger than intimidation, and she'd never learned that. Minutes later, voices echoed from the hallway. Hartwell's attorney arrived first, carrying a briefcase and the expression of a man who hadn't slept. Ryan followed, looking hollow-eyed and rumpled. His tie hung loose. He kept tugging at the knot like it was strangling him. Amy walked beside him, her posture straight but her eyes swollen. With a pang, I noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. And then came Evelyn. She swept into the conference room like she was entering a palace she believed she still owned. White suit, perfect hair, chin lifted high enough to scrape the ceiling. But there were cracks today, hair sprayed too tightly, lipstick smudged at one corner, her hands trembling the slightest bit as she set her purse down. The representatives from Blue Harbor were already seated, faces composed, expressions unreadable. They stood politely as the Hartwells entered, shaking hands with professional ease. The meeting began. Ben and I listened through the speaker in the adjoining room. James opened calmly. "Thank you all for coming. As stated, the purpose of today's meeting is to finalize the terms of the acquisition." Evelyn scoffed. "You call this an acquisition? I call it extortion." Douglas, the attorney, quietly placed a hand on her forearm. "Please," but she jerked away. James remained unfazed. "The offer stands $8.2 million for 60% ownership. The immediate capital infusion will prevent foreclosure and save the company." "You assume we're desperate," Evelyn said coldly. "You are desperate," Benjamin Clark responded. "According to your bank's most recent notices, you're 30 days from forced liquidation." Papers rustled sharply. Evelyn slapped her palm on the table. "These documents are misleading." The CFO spoke for the first time, voice shaking. "Mrs. Hart, they're accurate." Her glare could have scorched stone. "Silence," Amy interjected gently. "Mom, they're trying to help. Maybe we should listen. Not another word from you." The venom in Evelyn's voice was so sharp that even through the wall I flinched. James exhaled slowly. "We can proceed with signatures now." "No," Evelyn said. "Not until I know who I'm selling to. Who is your lead investor?" "Why all this secrecy?" Douglas cleared his throat. "They don't have to reveal, but we want transparency," Ryan cut in, "before we sign anything." Blue Harbor's 3 representatives exchanged a look, the kind that lasts only a fraction of a second but speaks volumes. "Very well," James said. "Our primary investor wishes to address you directly." My pulse surged. Ben glanced at me, eyes steady. "Ready," he whispered. I stood. On the other side of the wall, chairs scraped as curiosity rippled through the Hartwell side of the room. James walked to the connecting door. "Allow me," he said, opening it. I stepped inside. The air shifted instantly. Ryan's face went pale. Amy gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Evelyn froze, eyes widening in disbelief before narrowing with disbelief and fury. "You?" she breathed. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" I walked to the table without rushing, without wavering. "Good morning," I said, taking the empty seat at the head of the table. I'm here as the primary investor of Blue Harbor." The silence was overwhelming. Beautiful, heavy as marble. "You," Evelyn repeated as if her brain refused to accept the reality. I nodded. I liquidated assets, investments, and property to gather the capital needed. "The offer is mine." "You expect us to believe," she spat, "that a janitor has $8 million lying around?" "I'm not a janitor," I answered calmly. "I never was. I was simply doing the job you assigned me." A muscle in her jaw twitched. "This is insane." "No," Ben said, stepping into the room beside me. "This is legal, fully documented, fully vetted." I folded my hands on the table. "Let's proceed." Douglas cleared his throat nervously. "Mrs. Hart, the offer is legitimate." "It's theft," Evelyn snapped. "It's business," I replied. "Something you used to understand." Her glare could have cracked the table. Why would you do this?" I held her gaze. "Because 3 weeks ago you put me on my knees. Because you humiliated me in front of your staff, your clients, and my sister. Because you built a culture of fear, not leadership. Because your company is collapsing, and instead of fixing it, you hid it. And because I refuse to let the people working under you lose their livelihoods because of your pride." Amy made a small sound, a wounded exhale. Tears shone in her eyes. Evelyn, trembling with rage, hissed, "You think you're better than me?" "No," I said softly. "I think I'm stronger than you." The room held its breath. Finally, Ryan spoke, voice raw. "Mom, we don't have a choice." She turned on him like a viper. "You ungrateful enough." His voice cracked like a branch snapping. "I'm done pretending everything's fine. You've been lying, and I let you. But I won't let this company die because you can't admit you made mistakes." For the first time, Evelyn looked shaken, truly shaken. James slid the contract across the table. "It's time." Douglas handed her a pen. Her fingers trembled. She stared at the signature line like it was a death sentence. Amy whispered, "Mom, please." Slowly, painfully, Evelyn pressed the pen to the paper and signed. Her signature looked more like a slash. One by one, the others signed too. Ryan pale and exhausted. Douglas formal and distant. The CFO almost relieved. And then the papers were handed back to Ben. He nodded to me. "It's done," he said. A hush fell over the room. Ryan lifted his head. "What happens now?" I stood. "Now the company is reorganized. Employees are protected. Operations will stabilize, and leadership will change." Evelyn surged to her feet. "You can't fire me." I met her fury with quiet certainty. "You're not fired. You're relieved of all decision-making authority and removed from operational control. You can choose to remain as a consultant for a reduced salary or leave altogether." Her face contorted with disbelief. "You insignificant!" I stepped closer just enough that she had to look at me without the safety of distance. "Humiliation," I said softly, "doesn't feel so powerful when it's reflected back at you, does it?" She trembled. I turned to Amy. "You can stay, you can leave. But you're free now. You don't owe this family your silence anymore." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Ryan looked at his wife. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She didn't answer. Ben gathered the documents, closed the folder, and tapped it lightly. Blue Harbor now owns 60% of Hartwell & Co. Further details will be communicated by end of day. As I walked toward the door, Evelyn's voice cracked out behind me. "This isn't justice," she hissed. "This is revenge." I paused, turning just enough to meet her eyes. "No," I said. "This is consequence." And then I left the room, the echoes of a dynasty dying behind me, the weight of a new future forming in my chest. I walked into the Hartwell building the next morning, not as a shadow, not as the woman scrubbing floors, not as the sister people whispered about, but as the majority owner of the entire company. Gravel crunched beneath my heels as I crossed the parking lot, the morning air cool, crisp, sharper than usual. It felt different today. The building looked different. Or maybe I was finally seeing it through eyes that weren't clouded by fear or humiliation. When I stepped through the lobby doors, the receptionist froze mid-sentence. Her mouth parted, her eyes widened. "Ms. Hale?" she began breath-catching. "Good morning, Amanda," I said, offering a small smile. "Good morning, ma'am," she said, standing so quickly her chair rolled backward. "Congratulations." Her voice trembled with genuine relief. Maybe that was the first sign that the change happening here wasn't just structural, it was emotional too. Fear had ruled this building for so long that kindness felt like rebellion. As I approached the elevator, 2 employees carrying folders stopped talking and stepped aside respectfully. One of them, a young man from accounting, murmured, "We're glad you're here." The words were simple, but the sincerity in them hit deeper than anything Evelyn had ever thrown at me. On the executive floor, the doors opened with a soft chime. The usual buzz of tension was absent. In its place sat an unfamiliar quiet, the kind that settles right after a storm destroys everything fragile, but leaves the air fresh. My first stop was the office they had cleared for me overnight. Amy's doing no doubt her small way of extending an olive branch. I paused in the doorway, taking it in. The room wasn't extravagant like Evelyn's had been. No pretentious portraits, no intimidating decor. Just a desk aplant by the window and a city view that shimmered as sunlight broke through the clouds. On the desk sat a picture frame I didn't recognize. Amy must have placed it there. It was a photo of the 2 of us, me at 20, her at 14, sitting on the hood of our old car eating ice cream cones. Our smiles were crooked, our hair was messy, but we were happy in that picture. We were together. My throat tightened. I set the frame aside as someone knocked on the door. Thomas stepped in, cap in hand, the same steady calm in his face that had helped me stay grounded when everything around me told me I didn't belong. "Morning, Ms. Hale," he said. "Marianne," I corrected. He nodded. "Marianne." Then he approached the desk, lowering his voice. "I spoke with some of the guys downstairs. They're hopeful. It's been a long time since anyone up here made them feel like more than disposable parts." His words warmed something inside me. The change is real, and it starts with people like you. He gave a small smile. "Anything you need, you let me know." After he left, I reviewed the documents Ben and I had organized: overnight appointment memos, restructuring plans, vendor negotiations, immediate financial triage. Running a company wasn't a hobby. It wasn't a title. It was responsibility. One I wasn't going to take lightly. At 10 o'clock, I held the first all-staff meeting. Nearly 80 employees filed into the large conference room. The atmosphere was tense, anxious, curious. I stood at the front looking at the same people who had once watched me wipe floors while pretending not to see me. But now when their eyes met mine, there was no pity. Only expectation. Only hope. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady. A few people murmured it back. Others simply waited. "I know the last few months have been difficult," I continued. "You've carried heavy workloads, faced unclear direction, and in some cases endured treatment no employee should ever endure. That ends today." A ripple moved across the room, skepticism mixed with relief. "This company," I said, "was built on talent, not intimidation. On skill, not fear. And it will be rebuilt with dignity for every single one of you." I saw shoulders loosen, eyes brighten. A woman from HR covered her mouth as if holding back tears. "We're stabilizing finances immediately," I continued. "Payroll will be on time, vendor contracts will be honored, and every department will have the resources it needs to function without crisis." Someone exhaled loudly, an honest, shaky breath. "As for the culture here, if anyone in leadership believes bullying is a management technique, they will find themselves without a leadership role by the end of the week." This time the response wasn't quiet. It was applause, soft at first, then stronger, then rolling across the room like a wave. When it finally died down, Thomas raised his hand from the back row. "What about Evelyn?" he asked, all eyes fixed on me. "She has been removed from executive operations," I said calmly. "She is free to stay on as a consultant with no decision-making authority, or she can choose to leave entirely. Whispers exploded, but not in panic and astonishment. And something else, relief. After the meeting, employees approached me one by one, some to shake my hand, some to thank me, some simply to say, "Welcome." The last person in line was Melissa. She stopped in front of me, her hands clasped nervously. "You don't know what this means to us." "I think I do," I said softly. Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." As she turned to leave, she paused. "And I found something else. Something I thought you should see." She pulled a manila envelope from her bag. Documents from last year's annual filings. I didn't know where else to take them. I took the envelope. "You did the right thing." After she left, I returned to my office and opened it. Inside were spreadsheets, bank transfers, invoices routed to shell vendors, notes from someone likely Evelyn annotating delays, forged approvals pressure on Ryan, and outright manipulation of the accounting team. The truth was uglier than I'd known, but now the truth belonged to me. Around noon, Amy stepped into my office. She closed the door quietly behind her. "Hi," she said. Her eyes were swollen, but she looked stronger somehow. "Hi," I replied. "Come in." She held a white envelope in her hand. I moved out this morning." I stood so quickly the chair rolled backward slightly. "Are you safe?" "Yes, I'm staying with a friend." She inhaled shakily. "I told Ryan I needed space, and I told Evelyn," her voice faltered. "I told her I would no longer be controlled by fear." Emotion tightened in my chest. "I'm proud of you." Her chin trembled. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. She stepped closer. "You saved me long before this, and you saved me again yesterday." "I wasn't trying to save you," I said softly. "I was trying to save myself." "And you did," she whispered. "But you saved me too." We embraced, tentative at first, then real, solid, fierce. For the first time in years, I felt my sister's arms around me, not as someone needing rescue, but as someone choosing to stand with me. When she pulled away, she wiped her eyes. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "we rebuild. For everyone." She nodded. "I want to help. Then we'll do it together." After she left, I stared at the city skyline outside my window. The Hartwell Tower stood tall, but it no longer felt like something looming over me. It felt like something I held, something I would shape, something I would rebuild with the care it had been denied for so long. Later that afternoon, Lucas arrived with updated reports. He leaned on the doorframe, watching me sort through spreadsheets. "You look different," he said lightly. How like someone who finally stepped into the life she always deserved. I smiled faintly. "It feels right." He set the folder down gently. I saw the news. Employees seem hopeful. They should be. He studied my face. "And you, are you hopeful too?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." And for the first time saying it felt true. After he left, I remained in my office long past sunset. The lights of the city outside blinked on one by one, dotting the skyline like small promises. The building around me quieted as employees clocked out without fear for once, without dread, without bracing for Evelyn's judgment. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration of truth, of dignity, of people who had been unseen for too long. And as I prepared for the days ahead, the rebuilding, the restructuring, the healing, I felt something settle in my chest like an anchor made of light. I was exactly where I needed to be. Not on my knees, not in the shadows, but here, leading something worth saving. And I wasn't done yet. 6 months passed before I realized I'd stopped holding my breath. It happened on a quiet Tuesday morning as I walked through the halls of the newly renamed Hale & Briggs development, my halls now, though I still wasn't used to my and company existing in the same breath. The fluorescent lights that once seemed harsh now felt soft. Employees who used to keep their eyes down now lifted their heads and smiled. Conversations once whispered in tension now rose in natural, steady waves. Everything felt different, not because the walls had changed, but because the people inside them finally felt safe. I nodded to team leads, answered questions, signed vendor checks, reviewed project timelines, and paused to chat with junior staff who still seemed startled that I remembered their names. Their relief never stopped humbling me. They'd lived too long in the shadow of a leadership style that treated dignity as optional. As I walked toward the elevator, a voice called after me. "Morning, Ms. Hale." I turned to see Maria, one of our administrative assistants, jogging a few steps to catch up. She was in her 60s, hair silver, and pulled into a tidy twist, eyes bright with something like pride. "We finalized payroll ahead of schedule," she said. "Everyone's getting their raises this cycle. They're ecstatic." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Something warm flickered through me. "Thank you, Maria. That means everything." She squeezed my arm. "No, dear. It means everything to us." When she walked away, I lingered for a moment in the quiet corridor, letting her words settle. I'd expected resistance when we made changes, new policies, transparency standards, mental health days, anonymous reporting channels. Instead, I watched employees blossom. Fear siphons strength. Dignity restores it. Outside construction noise drifted in from the west side, the community housing project Lucas and I had been planning since the takeover. The sun reflected off the cranes as if blessing the site. That was our flagship project, our promise to rebuild not just an empire but something good. I grabbed my coat and headed out to the car. I needed to see the site with my own eyes today. When I arrived, the smell of fresh lumber hit me before my feet touched the gravel. The lot hummed with movement, workers calling instructions, hammers ringing, engines rumbling. The foundation lines were taking shape, a grid of purpose rising from the dirt. Lucas spotted me from across the site and lifted a hand in greeting. He walked over, hard hat tucked under his arm. "You picked a good day to visit," he said. "We poured the last foundation pad this morning. Crew finished ahead of schedule." "It looks incredible," I said, scanning the expanse. "Better than the renderings." He smiled. "Your vision did this." "Your execution did," I countered. We stood there quietly for a moment, watching the future climb out of the ground. "Do you realize," he said softly, "you're building something you never had growing up?" The words hit deeper than he knew. I swallowed. "Maybe I'm building something for others who never had it either." He nodded, stepping closer. "You rebuilt yourself too, Marianne." I met his gaze. I had help. We held each other's eyes, steady, unhurried, until the wind picked up and carried the scent of sawdust between us. Something warm settled in my chest, not urgent or overwhelming, just steady. A possibility living quietly at the edge of something new. By noon, I was back at the office sorting through the final paperwork for the mid-year restructure. A soft knock broke my concentration. Amy stepped inside, holding 2 sandwiches and a bottle of iced tea. "Lunch," she said, smiling gently. "No arguments." I motioned for her to sit. These days she looked different, lighter, calmer, a woman waking from a decade-long fog. "How are things at the apartment?" I asked. She exhaled. "Quiet. Peaceful. I'm learning who I am when no one's telling me who to be." "And work. I love my new job," she said, eyes bright. "Small law firm. People treat me like an equal, not a decorative accessory. It's strange." She laughed softly. "In the best way." We ate in companionable silence, the kind we hadn't shared since we were kids. After a moment she said softly, "Did I ever tell you I'm proud of you?" The word struck me harder than I expected. "No," I said with a small laugh. "You didn't?" "Well," she said, placing her hand over mine. "I am. More than you know." I squeezed her fingers. "I'm proud of you too." She swallowed, blinking away emotion. Then, after a deep breath, she added quietly, "I filed for divorce." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand again. "I know that wasn't easy." "It wasn't," she whispered. "But staying would have been harder." We held that moment together. Not as the woman on her knees and the sister looking away, but as 2 women who had both finally stood up. After she left, the afternoon settled into a quiet rhythm. Meetings, emails, approvals, plans. But beneath it all, a sense of completion began to form, gentle as dusk. Near 5 o'clock, Thomas stopped by with a clipboard. "We're updating maintenance staffing," he said. "Wanted to show you before we finalize." He handed me the sheet. At the top was a new title under his name, Operations and Facilities Supervisor. I looked up at him. "Congratulations." He shrugged bashfully. "Never thought I'd see the day. Thank you for making it possible." "You earned it," I said. "All I did was stop someone from blocking the door." He gave me a small salute and headed out. The office slowly emptied until silence filled the halls again. I stayed late finishing notes and reviewing projections. When I finally shut down my computer, the building felt peaceful, illuminated by the soft glow of evening lights. I walked down the stairs instead of taking the elevator, letting the quiet wrap around me. At the glass doors, I paused and looked back one last time. This building had once held my humiliation. Now it held my legacy. Outside, the sky deepened into night colors, fading into one another: blue, into violet, into black. I stood on the steps, breathing in the cool air, feeling the weight of past and present settle into something whole. Maybe this was what dignity felt like when reclaimed. Not triumph, not victory, but peace. Before heading home, I whispered a quiet thanks to the woman I had been, to the woman I had become, and to the ones who had stood with me along the way, and to the ones who tried to crush me. They taught me exactly where to begin again. As I reached my car, I took one last look at the lights blazing through the windows of Hale and Briggs Development. Each one was a reminder that change didn't arrive in a roar, it arrived in a choice, in a moment, in a refusal to kneel. And this time, I had chosen myself. If you've stayed with me through this journey, I'd love to know what part of this story spoke to you most. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. And if stories of dignity, resilience, and second chances matter to you, I hope you'll stay with this channel for the next one. There are more truths to tell, and I'd be honored to share them with you.